When someone ignores you, it stings, doesn't it? That deep, gnawing ache that cuts right through your pride, your heart, your sense of worth. It's almost as if the world itself shrinks and you're left standing there, searching for a reason, wondering what went wrong. But let me tell you something, and I need you to really hear this: being ignored is more than just pain, it's a sign. And signs, my friends, are not meant to be overlooked or brushed aside. They're meant to teach us something, show us something, and guide us to something deeper within ourselves. Now, I know what you're thinking. How could being ignored be anything but negative? How could it be anything but a slap in the face? But here's what I want you to do. Take a step back, pause, and let's dig deeper. You see, in life, we're often so focused on the noise, the crowd, the recognition, and the validation that we forget to pay attention to the moments of silence. When someone ignores you, it's not just them withholding attention, it's life's way of putting a spotlight on something important. A spotlight on who's truly there for you. A spotlight on your resilience, your strength, and the path you're meant to be walking. Let's talk about who's doing the ignoring for a moment. Is it a friend? A family member? Someone you thought would stand by your side, rain or shine? That's where it cuts the deepest, doesn't it? When the people closest to us, the ones we lean on, the ones we trust, make us feel unseen, it shakes us to our core. It makes you question everything: their loyalty, your worth, and sometimes even your place in their world. But listen closely now, because this part is crucial. When they choose to ignore you, understand that it often reveals more about them than it does about you. It's a sign of their priorities, their capacity, and sometimes their limitations. And that's a truth not easily digested. It's not always about you falling short or doing something wrong. Sometimes it's a reflection of where they are in life, their struggles, their distractions, or their choices. And maybe, just maybe, it's a moment for you to realize that the person who deserves the most attention, the most care, and the most investment is you. Oh, I know that can be a bitter pill to swallow. You see, we're wired to seek connection, to crave acceptance, to feel valued in the eyes of those we care about. But here's the danger: if you let the opinions and actions of others dictate how you feel about yourself, you're handing over your power on a silver platter. When someone ignores you, it's a sign for you to pause, to take inventory of your self-worth. It's a wake-up call to recognize that the validation you seek from others should never be the only source of your strength. You need to build that foundation within yourself. Because let me tell you, you are more than someone's attention or lack thereof. Your worth, your value, your essence, they don't hinge on whether someone chooses to notice you or not. Think about that for a second. How many times have you lost sleep replaying moments in your mind, analyzing every little detail, wondering what you could have said or done differently? How many times have you allowed your spirit to shrink just because someone you held close decided you weren't worth their time? That's a heavy load to carry, and it wears you down. But here's where you need to listen closely. The moment you place your sense of worth in the hands of another, you're at their mercy. Your joy, your peace, your sense of self, all of it depends on how they decide to act on any given day. That's a dangerous game, my friends. You deserve more than that. There's an incredible power in realizing that the silence, that void where you once felt connection, is an invitation to step up and reclaim your voice. You see, when people ignore you, it's not just their actions at play. It's an opportunity disguised as rejection to look inwards and find out just how resilient you truly are. Yes, it hurts. It can feel like your world is turning upside down. But in those quiet, painful moments, that's where you find out what you're made of. It's in the silence that you can rebuild your sense of self brick by brick, learning that you are enough not because someone says you are, but because you choose to believe it. Let me tell you something that a lot of people don't talk about. Those moments when you feel overlooked are often the birthplace of your strongest growth. Why? Because they force you to face yourself. You're no longer surrounded by the constant chatter of validation or the comfort of familiar voices reassuring you. Instead, you're standing alone in the quiet with only your thoughts and your willpower. That's when you dig deep. That's when you learn to love yourself, not for what you do or who acknowledges it, but for who you are at your core. And that kind of love, it's unshakable. It doesn't fade when people walk away, and it doesn't waver when you're met with silence. The world we live in is noisy, my friends. Social media likes, comments, and follows have trained us to seek external validation at every turn. We start to believe that we're only as good as the attention we receive. But here's the truth, that no number of likes or acknowledgement will teach you your value is inherent. It's built into who you are, not in how others perceive you. When you begin to understand that, the power others have over you starts to fade. The sting of being ignored becomes less sharp, less defining, and instead, it becomes a signpost, a moment to refocus your energy on where it truly matters on you. Think about the times you've been ignored and how they've changed you. Have they made you question your worth, or have they pushed you to become stronger? If you're honest with yourself, you'll realize that some of your greatest moments of clarity, of self-discovery, came when someone chose not to see you. It's as if life was telling you, look inward. What they can't see is what you need to find. It's not about blaming others or holding on to resentment. It's about understanding that everyone is fighting their own battles, and sometimes their silence is not an indictment of your value, but a reflection of their struggles or indifference. And let's not overlook the fact that sometimes the reason someone ignores you has nothing to do with malice or neglect. People get busy, overwhelmed, and caught up in their own worlds. It happens. But what matters most is not why they choose to ignore you, it's how you choose to respond to it. Do you let it define your day, your mood, your belief in yourself? Or do you take it as a reminder that while people may come and go, the one constant in your life is you? And if you're going to be your own constant, wouldn't it make sense to nurture that relationship, to build yourself up so that no amount of silence or neglect can shake you? I want you to imagine a tree standing alone on a hillside. Day after day, the winds blow past it, the rain pours down, and sometimes the sun scorches it. But that tree doesn't question its place. It doesn't shrink back when the wind howls or wither when it's not noticed. It stands firm because its roots run deep. It knows that its strength isn't in being admired, but in standing tall season after season, no matter who's looking. That's the kind of strength I want you to cultivate within yourself. Because, my friends, life is full of moments where you'll be overlooked, ignored, and underestimated. But don't let those moments convince you that you're not worthy of being seen. Instead, let them remind you that your strength lies in standing tall anyway, in believing in yourself even when no one else does. That's not just survival, that's thriving. That's saying to the world, I'm here and I matter whether you acknowledge it or not. And let's be real, some people will never see your worth no matter what you do. You can shout your accomplishments from the rooftops, give until you're empty, and some will still turn a blind eye. But that's not your burden to bear. Your job is not to make others see your value. Your job is to see it for yourself. When you do, you'll notice something incredible happens. The opinions of those who choose to overlook you start to lose their grip. The pain of being ignored softens, and you realize that their validation was never the fuel you needed. You were your own source all along. And when you reach that place where you stand in your own worth unwavering, you'll find that the right people will see you. The right opportunities will come. Not because you needed them to survive, but because you thrived without them. And that kind of energy is magnetic. It draws in the people and experiences that are aligned with who you truly are, not who you were trying to be to fit someone else's vision. So the next time you feel the sting of being ignored, don't rush to fill that void with noise or doubt. Sit in it, embrace it. Let it be the reminder that the most important person to acknowledge your worth is already looking back at you in the mirror. That's where true strength comes from knowing that your value doesn't waver. Even in the silence, it grows stronger, roots deeper, and stands taller with each passing moment. Because when someone ignores you, it hurts. But it's also a sign that it's time to turn your attention inward and rediscover just how powerful, resilient, and worthy you truly are. Let me share a story with you. There was a young man full of ambition, dreams, and unwavering energy. He gave everything he had to everyone around him. He was always the first to offer a helping hand, the one people called on when they needed support. He never hesitated to lift others up, even when it left him drained. But then life took a turn. The very people he'd supported so tirelessly began to drift away. Calls went unanswered, invitations left hanging. It hurt him deeply. He felt forgotten, as if everything he'd done had been for nothing. He started questioning his worth, wondering if he had ever really mattered at all. But in the quiet, something shifted within him. In that silence, he found himself. He realized that the time and energy he had poured into others needed to be invested back into himself. It wasn't easy. It took time. It took those long, lonely nights where he fought against the echo of his doubts, where he had to remind himself over and over that being ignored was not a reflection of his value. Slowly, he learned that being ignored was not a sentence, but a sign that it was time to turn inward, to build himself up from within, to be his own biggest supporter. And do you know what happened next? When he started investing in himself, in his dreams, in his passions, everything changed. He discovered that the validation he had been seeking externally was already inside him, waiting to be recognized. Now, don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying that people ignoring you won't hurt, because it will. It's human nature to feel that sting. That sharp ache that comes when someone you trusted, someone you held dear, decides you're not worth their attention. But here's the thing, you have a choice in that moment. You can choose to let their silence define you, or you can let it propel you forward. The young man, he made that choice. He chose to fill that silence not with self-doubt, not with desperation, and not with the frantic effort to win back the attention of those who turned away. Instead, he let that silence be the space where he remembered who he was. He began to see that his worth wasn't tied to who called him back or who kept inviting him in. He reconnected with his own spirit, his own dreams. He stopped looking outward for the applause and started giving himself the praise he deserved. And that was powerful. Because when you stand in that quiet and can look at yourself and say, I see myself, and that's enough, you become unshakable. When you reach that point where your value isn't hinged on the attention of others, the world can throw its worst at you, and you'll still stand tall. Now, some might say, why not fight for those relationships? Why not push to get their attention back? And listen, I'm not saying there's no place for reconciliation or reaching out. But there's a difference between reconnecting and losing yourself in the pursuit of someone else's acknowledgement. When that young man chose himself, When he decided that his energy would be spent on building his own path instead of chasing after those who'd walked away, he found something priceless: peace. He found that he could sit alone and be content, that he could chase his dreams and feel fulfilled without needing a chorus of voices telling him he was on the right track. That's the kind of strength I want you to know you have. The kind that doesn't crumble when someone you expected to stand by you chooses not to. The kind that doesn't waver when you walk into a room and no one turns their head. It's the strength that says, I am here, I am enough, and I am moving forward. And when you have that, people start to notice, but by the time they do, it won't matter as much, because you'll know deep down that their recognition is just a cherry on top, not the whole cake. People often come and go in life, and their attention follows their priorities. That's just how it is. It's not always personal. People get caught up in their own worlds, their own struggles, their own desires. And sometimes that means they're not going to be there when you think they should be. It might feel like a betrayal. But remember, that's a reflection of them, not you. The young man learned that lesson. He learned to let go of the idea that he needed to prove his worth to anyone but himself. And that's what I want you to take away from his story. The realization that when people ignore you, it's not a dead end. It's an invitation, a challenge to rise above the noise and find your voice in the silence. You see, silence can be intimidating. It can feel like emptiness, like something to be filled with explanations or apologies or noise. But what if, instead of trying to fill it, you leaned into it? What if you let that silence teach you who you are when no one is watching? That's where true strength is born. It's in those moments when you're alone with your thoughts and you choose to lift yourself up rather than wait for someone else to do it. That young man, he started investing in himself in ways he hadn't before. He pursued the dreams he put on the back burner, not for anyone's approval, but because they brought him joy. He learned new skills, built new habits, and grew in ways that didn't need validation from the outside. And as he did, he noticed something remarkable. The people who once ignored him started to see him again. But by then, their attention was a bonus, not a necessity. He had become his own greatest source of support, his own cheerleader, and his own guide. You can do that too. I'm telling you, when you make the choice to turn inward and invest in yourself, you begin to see that being ignored was never the problem. It was just a wake-up call you needed to shift your focus back to where it always belonged, on you. You learn that the applause, the attention, the acknowledgement, they're nice, but they're not the fuel that keeps you going. What keeps you going is knowing that you're living true to who you are, that you're building a life that makes you proud, no matter who's watching. And yes, people will still come and go. Some will stay and others will drift away again. But it won't rock you the way it used to. Because once you know your worth, really know it, no one can take that from you. You become unshakable, rooted in the knowledge that you are enough. And when you reach that place, the world opens up in ways you never imagined. Opportunities, relationships, moments of joy, all of them come. Not because you're chasing them, but because you're walking your path with confidence. So the next time you feel ignored, remember this: it's not the end, it's not a judgment. It's a sign. A sign that it's time to pause, to look within, and to remind yourself of who you are. It's a moment to choose you, to invest in you, and to trust that the validation you were looking for was within you all along. Let that silence be the space where you grow, where you become your own biggest advocate. Because once you do, No one's attention or lack thereof will ever have the power to shake you again. And that, my friends, is the kind of strength that changes everything. And here's another thing: sometimes being ignored clears the path for new opportunities, new connections, and new perspectives. It's like pruning a tree. You don't cut away the branches because you hate them. You do it so the tree can grow stronger, so it can flourish. When some branches fall away, it makes room for new, healthy growth. The same applies to your life. When people choose to look past you, when they choose to walk away or leave you hanging, it's not always a loss. Sometimes it's their loss, and sometimes it's just life making room for the next chapter, for the right people, for the ones who will see you clearly and cherish what they see. It's not always easy to accept this in the moment, though. When you're caught in that space of feeling ignored, it can feel like a storm in your chest. Your mind runs in circles trying to find answers, trying to fix things that may not even need fixing. But let me tell you something: not every problem requires your intervention, and not every person who walks away is meant to stay. The universe has a way of redirecting you, even when the reason isn't immediately clear. And sometimes that redirection starts with the unsettling silence that follows when someone ignores you. You see, that silence, that's an opportunity. That's space for growth. That's where you find out who you really are when no one's watching, when the applause has stopped, and when the stage is empty. It's easy to be strong when everyone's there, when you're surrounded by support and affirmation. But when the noise fades and all you've got is yourself, that's when you find out what you're really made of. Do you crumble under the weight of that silence, or do you rise and fill it with your own voice, your own determination? Think about that for a moment. Think about how you react when you feel overlooked. Do you let it shrink you, make you doubt your worth, or do you use it as fuel to dig deeper? Because let me tell you, how you respond to being ignored says more about your strength and character than how you handle praise or acknowledgement. Those moments when you feel unseen, those are the moments that build resilience. They forge the kind of strength that doesn't depend on anyone else's validation. Now, it's human to feel that sting. Don't think for a second that being strong means pretending that it doesn't hurt. It's okay to feel it. Acknowledge the ache, but don't let it control you. Don't let it drive you to seek validation in places that can't give you what you need. Remember this: you don't need to chase the attention of those who choose not to see you. You don't need to prove yourself to people who've already decided not to appreciate what you bring to the table. That energy, that effort, that drive redirected back into yourself. And here's where the real shift happens. When you start focusing on yourself, when you pour all that energy you were using to win back someone's attention into nurturing your own goals and dreams, everything changes. You start to see that your worth was never dependent on someone else's recognition. You start to realize that you are enough, that your value isn't tied to who is looking your way or clapping from the sidelines. You are enough because you say so, because you believe in your heart that your purpose is not defined by other people's opinions. When you reach that point, when you start filling the silence with your own strength, that's when you begin to draw on the right kind of people. People who don't need convincing of your value. People who see you for who you are without needing you to shout to be noticed. But here's the twist: by the time those people show up, you'll have already built something even more important, a foundation that doesn't shake when the crowd comes or goes. You'll have the peace of knowing that even when you're alone, you are still whole. Let me tell you, that peace is powerful. When you can look in the mirror and say, I see myself and I'm proud of who I am, you become unstoppable. When you can walk into a room and not seek out the faces that may or may not look back at you with approval. That's freedom. Because at the end of the day, being ignored isn't the worst thing that can happen to you. The worst thing is ignoring yourself, ignoring your potential, ignoring the voice inside that's been telling you all along that you are capable, worthy, and enough. Let's take it even further. Let's talk about the people who do the ignoring. Sometimes they're dealing with their own battles, their own insecurities, their own distractions. It's not always about you falling short or doing something wrong. Sometimes they simply don't have the capacity to give you what you need. And sometimes their absence, their silence, is the universe's way of showing you that you don't need them as much as you thought you did. It's life's way of pushing you towards self-reliance, of teaching you that the only approval you should be chasing is your own. So the next time you feel ignored, ask yourself, what can I do with this space? How can I use this moment to strengthen my resolve, to sharpen my focus? Don't rush to fill that void with desperate attempts to be seen or heard. Instead, fill it with the sound of your own progress, your own victories, even the small ones that only you know about. Because those victories, those moments when you rise despite the silence, are the ones that build you up from the inside out. And here's the kicker: when you learn to fill that silence, to thrive in it, you become the kind of person who commands respect without needing to demand it. You become someone whose presence is felt even when you're not in the room. That's the kind of strength that can't be ignored, no matter who chooses to acknowledge it. So let them walk away if they need to. Let them turn their backs if that's their choice. You don't need to follow. You don't need to plead. Stand tall, keep moving forward, and let them see that your path doesn't end just because they took an exit. Let them see that you're still building, still growing, still pushing toward the life you were meant to live. And if they ever look back, they'll see you standing stronger than ever, not because of them, but in spite of them. And remember this: the silence isn't empty. It's full of potential, full of your own voice, your own plans, your own power. Let that be enough. Fill it with your laughter, your dreams, your progress. Fill it with love for yourself, because that's the love that stays when everything else falls away. I'm here to tell you, dig deeper. Stand taller. Don't let the opinions and actions of others convince you that your voice doesn't matter. Let being ignored be a sign that it's time to speak louder, not in desperation, but in certainty. Certainty that you have a story to tell, a path to walk, and a destiny that isn't shaped by the fleeting attention of others, but by your unwavering belief in yourself. There's power in that realization. There's power in understanding that your worth isn't up for debate. It's not tied to who acknowledges you or who decides to turn a blind eye. It's anchored in who you are when everything else falls silent. I've seen people crumble under the weight of being overlooked, and I've seen people rise, not because they were trying to prove anything to anyone else, but because they discovered that their value was never dependent on outside validation. And that, my friends, is the secret right there. It's not about proving your worth to the world. It's about owning it, embodying it, and letting it radiate from within. And one more thing, because this is important: being ignored can also be a lesson in empathy. When you know what it feels like to be unseen, you carry that understanding forward. You become someone who sees others, who listens, who makes others feel valued. You take that silence that once felt suffocating and you turn it into a breath of fresh air for someone else. You know the weight of feeling overlooked. And that experience can shape you into someone who lifts others up, who offers the very thing you once longed for. It's a chance to transform pain into purpose, silence into service. Because when you've walked through that fire, You come out the other side with a deeper understanding of what it means to be seen, to be heard, and to be acknowledged. Don't let being ignored harden you, let it deepen you. Let it teach you to be the person who gives the attention you once longed for, to yourself and to others. You see, the world doesn't need more people who react to pain by closing themselves off. It needs people who turn that pain into compassion, who take that silence and use it as fuel to connect on a level that goes beyond the surface. Because here's the thing, everyone, at some point, feels unseen. Everyone feels ignored, passed over, or left out. But it's what you do with that experience that sets you apart. When the silence comes, when the voices stop, and you're left with just your thoughts, that's the moment you either shrink or grow. That's the moment you decide whether you're going to let the world tell you who you are, or whether you're going to define it for yourself. And trust me, defining it for yourself is a game changer. You don't need the world's permission to be great. You don't need the constant nods of approval to know that you're on the right path. When you take that power back, when you claim it as your own, that's when real transformation happens. So the next time you find yourself in that aching silence, remember this is not the end of your story. It's not even close. It's a sign, a moment, a lesson. It's a chance for you to look in the mirror and say, I am enough just as I am, and believe it. Not just on the surface, but deep down where it matters. Because if you can do that, if you can hold on to that truth in the moments when no one else is holding it for you, you'll discover a kind of strength that doesn't waver when people come and go. You'll find that your voice has always been enough to fill any silence. That your presence has always been enough to stand tall, even when no one's watching. When the world goes quiet, that's when you get to speak the loudest with your actions, your perseverance, and your belief in yourself. It's easy to be confident when everyone's cheering your name, but true strength shows itself when the crowd is gone and you're left with just you. And let me tell you, that's not a bad place to be. It's where champions are made. It's where stories of resilience are written. It's where you find out that the most important voice you'll ever listen to is your own. Let that sink in for a moment. Let it remind you that being ignored may hurt, but it's not the kind of hurt that breaks you unless you let it. It's the kind that can build you, that can show you where your foundation lies and help you fortify it. You are more than the sum of who chooses to acknowledge you. You are the culmination of your experiences, your dreams, your efforts, and your determination. And none of that goes away just because someone else fails to see it. So don't give up when the attention fades or when the people you counted on turn away. Don't let that be the signal that you're not enough. Let it be the moment you dig deeper. Let it be the moment you decide to invest in yourself, to push forward, not for the applause, but for the satisfaction of knowing you did it, you made it, and you are stronger because of it. Because that's the truth. You don't need validation from anyone to walk your path. Your story is worth telling, your voice worth hearing, and your journey worth taking, even when the audience isn't paying attention. And if you ever start to doubt that, just remember that some of the greatest moments in life come when the world isn't watching. It's in those moments that you grow, that you push past the limits you once thought you had, and that you find out just how much you're capable of. So when the world goes quiet, when people turn away, and when the silence feels like it's pressing down on you, take a breath. Fill that silence with your own power, your own determination, and your own voice. Stand tall. Be certain. Because whether or not the world acknowledges it, you have always been enough. And that, my friends, is true strength.